Captain Jack Murphy was having a terrible day. Not just your regular, run-of-the-mill terrible day where you stub your toe or find out your favorite coffee shop switched to decaf. No, this was the special kind of terrible that only happens when you're trying to navigate an ancient Earth freighter through the most stuck-up sector of the galaxy while being tailgated by an alien patrol ship with more blinking lights than a Christmas tree on steroids. Your vessel has been selected for a routine inspection, announced a voice that sounded like a kazoo having an identity crisis. Please power down your engines and prepare for boarding. Jack slumped in his captain's chair, which was really just an old office chair he'd bolted to the deck. Computer, remind me again why we're hauling cargo through the perfectionist territory? Because you said, and I quote, "What's the worst that could happen?" End quote, replied the ship's AI in what Jack swore was an increasingly sarcastic tone. He really needed to check if that personality module was malfunctioning again. The patrol ship drew closer, its perfectly polished hull reflecting the light of nearby stars in a way that seemed deliberately designed to cause maximum eye strain. The Perfectionist Empire, as they dubbed themselves with characteristic modesty, were notorious for three things: their supposedly impenetrable energy shields, their overwhelming superiority complex, and their absolute conviction that they'd achieve technological perfection in every possible way. "They're scanning us," the computer announced, as helpful as a chocolate teapot, detecting elevated levels of disapproval in their sensor patterns. Disapproval? They can measure that now? The perfectionists can measure everything. It's kind of their thing. Jack watched as a boarding tube extended from the patrol ship, looking like a giant metallic elephant's trunk trying to sniff out contraband. He'd dealt with perfectionist inspectors before, and they made human customs officials look like party planners in comparison. The airlock cycled with a hiss that somehow managed to sound judgmental. Through it stepped Officer Zirk, a being whose uniform was so crisp it could probably cut diamonds. Like all perfectionists, Zirk had the general appearance of a humanoid praying mantis who'd attended far too many corporate seminars on proper posture. "Captain Murphy," Zirk pronounced each syllable like it was personally offensive. "Our scans indicate your vessel is carrying primitive artifacts." "Antiques," Jack corrected, trying not to sound offensive. "There's a legitimate market for Earth collectibles these days." Zirk's antenna twitched in what Jack had learned was the perfectionist equivalent of rolling one's eyes. Ah yes, the peculiar fascination some have with obsolete technology. Though I must say, even by human standards, your entire ship appears to be one large, obsolete artifact. She may not look like much, but she's got it where it counts. Jack patted the nearest bulkhead affectionately, then quickly wiped the rust off his hand when Zirk wasn't looking. Indeed. Zirk consulted a holographic clipboard that probably had more computing power than Earth's entire 21st century. "We'll need to conduct a thorough inspection. The Perfectionist Empire has recently elevated its security protocols due to certain concerns." "Certain concerns?" Jack raised an eyebrow. "That's wonderfully vague. Information is shared on a need-to-know basis, and you, Captain Murphy, do not need to know." Zirk's antenna quivered with barely contained superiority. "Now, please direct me to your cargo hold, and do try to avoid touching anything in my presence. Your species seems to shed an alarming amount of genetic material." As Jack led the way through his ship's corridors, he couldn't help but notice how Zirk seemed to be paying special attention to every dent, scratch, and patch job. The inspector's disapproval was practically radiating through their perfect energy shields. Little did either of them know that this routine inspection was about to spark a chain of events that would turn the galaxy's understanding of perfect technology completely on its head. But that's getting ahead of the story. First, they had to survive the inspection, and Jack had a sneaking suspicion that his cargo of primitive artifacts was about to cause more trouble than a quantum physics exam in a zero-gravity classroom. The cargo hold of Jack's ship, the Reasonable Doubt, looked like a museum of human history had gotten into a bar fight with a pawn shop. Scattered among the various crates and display cases were artifacts ranging from vintage video game consoles to what appeared to be a complete collection of 21st century kitchen gadgets. Officer Zirk's antennae twitched violently at the sight of a particular steel case. "What is that?" "That," Jack said with a hint of pride, "is my personal collection. Got my grandfather's service weapon in there, along with some other classics. Real pieces of history." Zirk activated a scanner that hummed with disapproval. "You have projectile weapons? Those barbaric devices that rely on chemical propulsion and crude metallic projectiles? Hey, show some respect. That's a genuine Beretta M9. She's gotten me out of more than a few tight spots." "Captain Murphy." Zerk's voice had the kind of patience usually reserved for explaining quantum physics to a garden snail. Surely you realize that such weapons are completely useless in modern space combat? Our energy shields can deflect anything from laser fire to plasma bolts. A primitive projectile would simply disintegrate upon impact. Maybe, Jack shrugged. But I've always found there's something reliable about good old-fashioned bullets. They don't jam when you hit them with an EMP, they don't need power packs, and they never ask for software updates at inconvenient moments. The inspector made us sound like a dial-up modem having an existential crisis. This is exactly the kind of backward thinking that makes your species so fascinating to study. You cling to obsolete technology like a quantum barnacle to a starship hull. Before Jack could defend humanity's honor, the ship's computer interrupted with its usual impeccable timing. Captain, we're receiving a priority broadcast on all frequencies. It appears to be. Well, you should probably hear this yourself. The Holt speakers crackled to life, filling the air with a voice that managed to sound even more superior than Zerk's, no small feat. Attention inferior vessels. This is Admiral Nikes of the Perfectionist Empire. Due to recent security concerns, we are implementing immediate travel restrictions throughout this sector. Any non-perfectionist ships must submit to enhanced inspections and possible impoundment. Jack and Zerk exchanged glances, one worried, the other smug. Well, Zerk's antenna practically radiated satisfaction. It seems our routine inspection has become somewhat less routine. What exactly are these security concerns everyone keeps dancing around? Jack asked, already dreading the answer. If you must know, Zerk hesitated, then apparently decided that gloating took precedence over security clearance. We've detected potential threats to our perfect defense systems. Some radical elements suggest that our energy shields might have theoretical vulnerabilities. Theoretical vulnerabilities? Jack's eyebrows shot up. In your perfect shields? Well, clutch my pearls and call me surprised. Such vulnerabilities are purely hypothetical, Zerk snapped. Proposed by a discredited scientist who clearly suffered from imperfect thinking. Dr. Clix's theories about kinetic penetration of energy matrices are nothing but the ravings of a. The inspector froze, antenna rigid with horror at having said too much. Dr. Clix? Jack filed the name away for future reference. Sounds like an interesting person to know. That name is not to be spoken, Zerk declared, trying to backpedal so hard they nearly created a new form of propulsion. Now, given the new security protocols, I'll need to confiscate these primitive weapons for further study. Like hell you will. Jack stepped between Zerk and his gun case. These are registered antiquities with all the proper paperwork. You can't just. The ship's computer chose that moment to interrupt again, this time with genuine alarm in its synthetic voice. Captain, multiple ships just dropped out of hyperspace. Energy signatures match. They match perfectionist warships, but they're firing on the patrol vessel. The cargo hold's lighting shifted to red as proximity alarms began screaming. Jack and Zerk both stumbled as something rocked the ship. It appears, Jack said with the kind of calm that only comes from years of dealing with disaster, that your theoretical vulnerabilities just became a lot less theoretical. The sound of emergency bulkheads slamming shut echoed through the ship, along with the distinct impression that their day was about to get a whole lot more interesting. And not in the fun way that usually involved credits and alcohol. Your ship? Officer Zerk announced with the kind of calm usually reserved for people watching their house burn down while still making mortgage payments, is completely obsolete and inadequate for the current tactical situation. Another explosion rocked the reasonable doubt as Jack scrambled back to the bridge, with Zerk skittering along behind him like an anxious office worker late for a performance review. Computer, Jack called out as he threw himself into his captain's chair. Give me the rundown on our unfriendly visitors. 3 perfectionist warships, design classification utterly superior. They appear to be rebels against the current regime. The patrol ship's perfect shields are holding, but the rebels are employing some kind of modified weapons that seem to be causing localized shield disruptions. Impossible. Zerk's antennae were practically tied in knots. Our shields are perfect. The word is literally in all our engineering manuals. Tell that to them. Jack gestured at the view screen where the patrol ship was doing its best impression of a pinball machine with actual explosions. Computer, plot us an escape route. Working on it, Captain. Though I feel compelled to point out that our chances of survival are approximately equivalent to teaching quantum physics to a coffee maker. The ship shuddered as a stray shot clipped their stern. Jack's hands flew over the controls, putting the reasonable doubt into a spin that would have made a roller coaster designer queasy. Incoming transmission, the computer announced. From the rebel ships. The view screen flickered to life, revealing a face that looked like every other perfectionist except for a pair of distinctly non-regulation glasses perched precariously on what passed for a nose. This is Doc. Clicks. I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but I found myself short on options after being branded a traitor for pointing out basic physics. Dr. Clicks? Zerk's voice hit a pitch usually reserved for dog whistles. The defector? The same. Clicks adjusted their glasses in what Jack assumed was the perfectionist equivalent of a dramatic hair flip. And I see you're harassing another cargo ship. Some things never change, do they, Officer Zerk? You're insane, Zerk declared. Your theories about shield vulnerabilities are nothing but. Nothing but what? Clicks interrupted. Because from where I'm standing, or floating rather, it seems my insane theories are holding up rather well. The problem with claiming perfection, dear colleagues, is that it leaves no room for improvement, or for acknowledging when you're catastrophically wrong. Another blast rocked the ships, and Jack decided it was time to join the conversation. As fascinating as this debate is, we're still in the middle of a firefight. Dr. Clicks, I'm assuming you're not just here to prove a point? Ah, the human captain. Actually, you're exactly who I was hoping to find. I've been tracking your ship ever since I learned about your cargo of primitive weapons. Jack's eyes narrowed. How did you know about the perfectionist bureaucracy? Perfect? Please. Their database security is as flawed as their shields. Speaking of which, a massive explosion lit up space behind them. That would be the patrol ship's shield generator overloading. Don't worry, their escape pods are quite functional, unlike their egos. Zerk made a sound like a printer running out of toner. Captain Murphy, Clicks continued, I need your help. More specifically, I need your prehistoric arsenal. You see, I've discovered something rather interesting about our perfect shield technology. Something that explains why the Empire is so desperate to suppress my research. Let me guess, Jack said, a grin spreading across his face. It has something to do with good old-fashioned kinetic weapons? Precisely. Our shields were designed to stop energy weapons, particle beams, plasma, all the civilized forms of warfare. But simple physical projectiles, moving at just the right velocity? Well, Clicks's antenna wiggled in what might have been scientific glee. Let's just say the results are embarrassingly imperfect. That's absurd, Zerk protested. Our shields stop everything. Really? Clicks's voice dripped with sarcasm. When was the last time anyone actually tested them against projectile weapons? We've been so focused on energy-based attacks that we've created a cosmic blind spot. A blind spot that the Empire's enemies are about to exploit on a massive scale. Jack glanced at his weapons case, then back at the screen. So what exactly are you proposing? I'm proposing we save billions of lives by exposing this flaw before it's too late. The Empire's enemies are already manufacturing kinetic weapons. But if we can prove the vulnerability exists, force them to acknowledge it. More ships began dropping out of hyperspace. Official perfectionist warships this time, their hulls gleaming with that signature eye-searing polish. Captain, the computer chimed in. We have approximately 30 seconds before we're in range of their weapons. I suggest we make any existential decisions about the fate of galactic civilization rather quickly. Jack looked at his gun case, then at the increasingly panicked Zerk, and finally at Dr. Clicks's hopeful face on the screen. He took a deep breath and made what was either the smartest or dumbest decision of his life. Well, Doc, he said, reaching for the case, let's go make some imperfections in those perfect shields. If there's one thing you should know about space battles, it's that they're nothing like the movies. They're usually fought at ridiculous distances, with lots of complex calculations and very little dramatic flair. Unless, of course, you're about to do something monumentally stupid, like testing whether a 9mm handgun can punch through allegedly perfect energy shields. This plan is insane, Zerk announced, watching Jack check his grandfather's Beretta with practiced ease. You're going to get us all killed, and worse, you're going to make us look ridiculous. Good to see you have your priorities straight, Jack replied, slapping a magazine into place. Computer, status update? The good news is that Dr. Clicks's ships are keeping most of the Imperial forces occupied. The bad news is that we're on an intercept course with the Imperial flagship, and their admiral seems to have taken our existence personally. The view screen crackled to life, revealing an older perfectionist whose antenna had gone silver with age. Admiral Enix's uniform had so many medals it probably qualified as lightweight armor. Dr. Clicks, the admiral's voice could have frozen helium. Your rebellion ends here, and you, He turned to Jack. We'll surrender that primitive cargo immediately. About that, Jack held up the Beretta. I've got a little experiment in mind first. Tell me, Admiral, when was the last time your shields were tested against good old-fashioned lead? The Admiral's expression shifted from contempt to something approaching concern. You wouldn't dare. Oh, I absolutely would. Dr. Clicks, care to explain the physics to our friends? Clicks's image appeared on a split screen, practically vibrating with academic excitement. Gladly. You see, our energy shields are tuned to detect and deflect incoming energy signatures. They create a complex matrix of force fields that can stop anything from laser fire to plasma bolts. But a simple metal projectile, moving at the right velocity? It's like trying to use a coffee filter to stop a bowling ball. Nonsense, the Admiral scoffed, but there was a note of uncertainty in his voice. Our shields are perfect. They stop everything. Really? Jack aimed the Beretta at the view screen, more for dramatic effect than anything else. Care to bet your life on that? Or better yet, your reputation? The Admiral's antenna twitched violently. You're bluffing. Even if you were right, which you're not, you'd need to be inside our shield perimeter to test your absurd theory. Jack's grin would have made a shark uncomfortable. You mean like we are right now? The Admiral's eyes widened as he realized that during their conversation the reasonable doubt had slipped between two Imperial warships, riding their blind spots right into optimal testing range. Now, Dr. Clicks, Jack shouted. The rebel ships suddenly launched what appeared to be clouds of metal ball bearings into space. The Imperial ship's perfect shields lit up like Christmas trees as their automated defense systems tried to track thousands of simple metal spheres. Impossible, Zerk whispered, watching the tactical display. The shields aren't stopping them. They're just passing through. Captain, the computer interrupted. The Imperial ships are adjusting shield frequencies. They're trying to compensate, but they can't. Clicks finished. Because they'd have to completely redesign their shield matrix. Years of work, all because nobody thought to test against primitive weapons. The Admiral's face had turned a shade of green that probably didn't exist in nature. This is a trick. Some kind of illegal shield penetration technology. Nope. Jack chambered around with theatrical flair. Just good old-fashioned bullets. Want a demonstration? You wouldn't. The sharp crack of the 9mm echoed through the bridge. On the view screen, everyone watched as a small hole appeared in the Admiral's supposedly impenetrable command chair, right between his legs. Dead silence filled every channel. That, Jack announced to the universe at large, was a warning shot. The next one goes somewhere considerably less comfortable. Now, about those shield modifications Dr. Clicks suggested. The Admiral looked at the hole in his chair, then at the gun, then at his own shields, which had completely failed to stop a technology that predated space travel. This is... He struggled for words. Imperfect? Jack suggested helpfully. Suddenly, every alarm on the bridge started screaming. Multiple hyperspace signatures detected, the computer announced. Large fleet incoming. Energy signatures match. Oh dear. What is it? Jack demanded. Remember those enemies of the Empire that Dr. Clicks mentioned? The ones manufacturing kinetic weapons? They're here, and they brought friends. The view screen filled with ships of various designs, all bristling with what looked suspiciously like giant railguns. Well, Jack said, looking at his now seemingly inadequate handgun, this just got interesting. There's something uniquely humbling about watching a fleet of advanced alien warships realize they're about to be defeated by what amounts to very fast rocks. The Imperial ships hung in space like deer caught in headlights. If deer were massive warships and the headlights were artillery pieces the size of office buildings. Well, Jack announced to his increasingly crowded bridge, this has officially exceeded my quota for cosmic irony. Dr. Clicks had transported over during the confusion, and was now examining Jack's gun collection with the enthusiasm of a kid in a candy store. Fascinating. The elegant simplicity of chemical propulsion, the brilliant use of rifling to stabilize the projectile. Could we perhaps focus on the fleet of ships about to turn us into cosmic confetti? Zerk suggested, antenna twitching frantically as they watched more enemy vessels emerge from hyperspace. The enemy fleet's commander appeared on their view screen, revealing a species that looked like someone had tried to crossbreed a shark with a crystal chandelier. Imperial vessels, this is Commander Wictrix of the Combined Resistance. Your shields are useless against our weapons. Surrender or be destroyed. Admiral Nex, who had been unusually quiet since the demonstration of his chair's new ventilation system, finally spoke up. Never. The Perfectionist Empire does not surrender to inferior. He paused as another 9mm round zipped through his shields and removed his ceremonial hat. "Admiral," Jack said pleasantly, "I really think you should reconsider your position, preferably before our friends out there decide to test their big guns." "You don't understand." The Admiral's voice had lost its superior edge, replaced by something approaching desperation. "Our entire civilization is built on the principle of perfection. If word gets out that our shields have such a basic flaw, then you'll have to adapt, Doctor," Clicks interrupted. "Just like every other species in the galaxy, perfection isn't about never having flaws, it's about acknowledging and improving upon them." The enemy commander was starting to look impatient, which is quite a feat for someone whose face was mostly crystalline structures. "Your time is running out, perfectionists." Jack looked at his Beretta, then at the massive railguns pointed their way, and had what he would later describe as either a stroke of genius or just a regular stroke. "Computer, get me a channel to every ship out there. And I mean every ship. Broadcasting now, Captain. Though I feel compelled to point out that your plans traditionally end with us nearly dying. Ladies, gentlemen, and various other configurations of sentient being," Jack announced to the assembled fleets, "I have a proposition for you. Instead of turning the sector into a shooting gallery, how about we conduct a little weapons demonstration?" Everyone started talking at once. "Silence." Jack fired another round through the Admiral's shields, this time removing an especially gaudy medal. "Thank you. Now the perfectionists need proof that their shields need updating. The Resistance needs to prove their weapons will work. I suggest we settle this the old-fashioned way, with a shooting gallery." "Explain." Commander Voktrix's crystalline features sparkled with interest. "Simple. The perfectionists put up a line of unmanned ships. The Resistance gets to test their weapons. No casualties, no war, just good old-fashioned destructive science. And Dr. Clicks here can record everything for posterity." "That's actually quite reasonable." Dr. Clicks adjusted their glasses thoughtfully. "But what about our reputation?" the Admiral protested. "Your reputation for perfection? That ship has sailed, crashed, and is currently on fire," Jack replied. "But you could build a new reputation, one for being smart enough to acknowledge and fix your mistakes." A long silence followed, broken only by the gentle hum of weapons systems that could reduce everything in the sector to very small pieces. Finally, the Admiral's antenna drooped in resignation. "Very well, but I want it noted that we're only agreeing to this under protest." "Noted," Jack grinned. "Now let's go break some perfect shields in the name of science." What followed was possibly the most organized act of destruction in galactic history. The perfectionists lined up a series of automated drones, each protected by their supposedly impenetrable shields. The Resistance, with perhaps a bit too much enthusiasm, demonstrated exactly how penetrable those shields were. Dr. Clicks recorded everything, providing running commentary that sounded like a mix between a physics lecture and a sports announcement. Observe how the kinetic penetrators pass through the energy matrix with minimal resistance. Note the spectacular secondary explosions. Even Jerk got into the spirit, meticulously documenting shield failure points with their usual bureaucratic thoroughness. For the record, drone number 47's shield failed approximately 0.3 seconds faster than drone number 46. I suspect the paint job was insufficiently perfect. When the dust settled, the Perfectionist Empire had suffered its first official defeat, not in glorious combat, but in a carefully documented scientific demonstration involving what they had dismissed as primitive weapons. And Jack? Jack just sat in his captain's chair, watching the show and occasionally taking pot shots through various ships' shields just to keep everyone honest. His grandfather's Beretta had just changed the course of galactic history, and he couldn't wait to update its collection documentation. "You know," he said to no one in particular, "I think this might actually work out." That's when the computer chimed in with its impeccable timing. "Captain, we're receiving priority messages from 17 different weapons manufacturers, 17,000 museums, and something called the Galactic Institute for Studying Hilarious Historical Ironies." 2 months after what historians would later call the Great Shield Embarrassment, or in less polite circles, the day the Perfectionists got shot down by math, Jack Murphy found himself in an unusual position. Specifically, he was standing at a podium in the Perfectionist Empire's Grand Hall of Absolute Correctness, trying not to laugh at the irony. "And so," he concluded his speech to the assembled dignitaries, "I present this historically significant weapon to the Imperial Museum of Important Learning Experiences." His grandfather's Beretta, now mounted in a display case that probably cost more than his ship, was ceremonially accepted by a thoroughly humbled Admiral Nikes. The Admiral's hat and medals had been replaced, though he now twitched noticeably whenever anyone removed a pen cap too quickly. We accept this primitive, that is, this historically significant artifact, Nux announced, only stumbling slightly over the revised terminology, as a reminder that perfection is a journey, not a destination. In the audience, Dr. Clicks beamed with pride. The former rebel had been appointed head of the newly established Department of Imperfection Prevention, which was already revolutionizing shield technology throughout the galaxy. Their first act had been to rename the Perfect Shield Project to the more accurate Pretty Good Shield that were constantly improving. Officer Zirk, now promoted to Chief Inspector of Potentially Overlooked Variables, was meticulously documenting the ceremony. They had developed an almost disturbing fascination with ancient human weapons, starting a collection that now included everything from slingshots to potato cannons. Furthermore, the Admiral continued, reading from a script that had definitely been written by the Empire's newly formed PR department. We extend our gratitude to Captain Murphy for his direct approach to scientific demonstration. Don't mention it, Jack replied cheerfully. Always happy to shoot holes in people's theories, or their chairs. The ceremony concluded with the signing of the Kinetic Weapons Treaty, which established guidelines for the responsible use of what the perfectionists now carefully referred to as alternative velocity-based defense penetration systems. Jack was pretty sure someone had spent weeks coming up with that term just to avoid saying bullets. Later, at the reception, Jack found himself sharing a drink with Dr. Clicks and Commander Vatrix, whose crystalline features sparkled with amusement under the perfect lighting. You know, Vatrix mused. We spent years developing those railguns, and you accomplished the same thing with a handgun older than most space stations. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Jack shrugged. Though I hear your engineers are having fun combining ancient human ballistics with modern technology. Oh yes, Vatrix's crystals chimed with laughter. We're calling it retrotech. It's all the rage. Last week, someone mounted a pump-action shotgun on a quantum acceleration platform. Fascinating application of principles. Dr. Clicks interjected. The quantum field amplifies the pellet spread while maintaining coherent. Please. Jack held up his hand. No more physics. I've had enough science for 1 year. I just want to get back to my nice, simple job of hauling cargo. Ah, about that. Dr. Clicks adjusted their glasses. The Empire has a proposition for you. They're establishing a new division of their defense forces, focusing on unconventional warfare tactics. They need someone with unique perspective to run it. Let me guess. They want the guy who broke their perfect shields with a pistol? Precisely. Though they're calling it Alternative Defense Paradigm Consultation now. Jack looked around the Grand Hall where perfectionist society was still struggling to come to terms with the concept of imperfection. Change was happening, slowly but surely. He'd even spotted some officials wearing slightly misaligned badges, though that might have been an accident. Well, he said finally, I suppose someone needs to keep you all honest. But I have one condition. Name it, Vatrix and Clicks said simultaneously. I get to keep my ship. Someone needs to remind you all what real imperfection looks like. As if on cue, his computer's voice emerged from his communicator. Captain, I feel compelled to inform you that the reasonable doubt just failed another docking inspection. Apparently, our rust patterns are insufficiently symmetrical. Jack grinned. Wouldn't have it any other way. And so began a new chapter in galactic history, where perfection gave way to progress, and a battered freighter captain with an antique gun became a reluctant legend. The perfectionist empire learned to embrace imperfection. The resistance got to keep their really big guns, and weapons manufacturers throughout the galaxy discovered a surprising new market for what they called vintage kinetic solutions. As for Jack's grandfather's Beretta, it sits in its museum display, surrounded by perfect lighting and perfect climate control, a permanent reminder that sometimes the best solution to a perfect problem is a perfectly imperfect one. Just don't mention that to the artifact conservators. They're still trying to figure out how to perfectly preserve its imperfections.